Okay, oh exciting! Got my dad driving, so we can test Dad's driving skills as well. So we're starting Indigo Lost, book 1, part 1. I don't do chapters, so we're just going to keep on reading. I'll warn you when it's a new scene. Okay, so part 1, I'm going to try and do some voices, but I don't expect anything amazing, guys. Like, I'm not training this. So, stop it! Please stop! The words were a silent scream inside her head, echoing the plaintive cries in the room behind. She backed up against the wall, not that there was anyone in the front of her, but because she needed to hold on to something. Her small fingers clung to the edge of the doorframe and she pressed hard. I heard the back of her head, she pressed so hard, but nothing blocked out the sounds she heard from the kitchen that had witnessed more violence than it had cooking in her short life of 7 summers. How much longer until he stops? Knowing how often she had endured this filled her with hopelessness, and as much as she felt like a coward, she couldn't look, couldn't go in there. She was afraid that if she showed any part of herself around the doorframe, she would end up with the same fate. Besides, she did not need to see to know what was happening. Her mother's crying told her everything. Gabbled sentences in between the screams, in that soft, sweet voice she knew as well as her own, were trying to appease the monster of rage that was currently tearing their kitchen apart. The same monster that tore apart any sense of security, of peace, for everyone in the house, daily. Taking a lungful of air as quietly as she could, the child forced her eyes open and pressed her lips into a determined yet tremulous line. I wish I was older. I would go in there and I'd get him off her. I would tie him up. A higher-pitched shriek of agony interrupted her grand plans for heroism, bringing her back to the present as effectively as a punch to her gut. She knew what that felt like. It had happened plenty of times before. Angry, silent tears then streamed down her face. She had long ago learned to cry silently, as well as breathe silently. Some days she thought she might go mad from wanting so badly in her heart to save her mum, but there was nothing she could do. She'd learnt that lesson long time ago, age 5. She hadn't stood a chance. She had tried to stop him, and had been off school for a week. She had been so bruised. Too bruised for her to have gone without questions being asked. And her mum would have been blamed. Not the one who had put so many colours on her, he who lived a life of alcoholism and violence. She was young, but she'd already lost innocence to the brutal propensities of human nature. The terrified shrieking from behind her built into a climax. Please, stop! Proximity was never advisable. The monster was wont to look for a second victim when the fury was in him. Flight was the other viable option. Through tear-soaked lashes, she saw the door to the hall was open. Her brain knew she could make it if she was quick. For her own sake, she needed to just be a little further away. The adrenaline-fueled tension that poised her to run felt like it might break her into 1,000 shards. But pushing away, she ran towards the door, fearing any second a hand upon her shoulder, a hand she knew might hurl her against a wall or crush the life out of her. Out in the hall it was gloomy, because it had so little light, and in the grim late afternoon of the winter's day, it was as cold and as depressing as a crypt. The wallpaper had long ago lost any attractiveness or vibrancy, and had peeled off at the edges. The light fitting was so old it was almost antique, and the bulbs were no longer working. The child knew every single detail and despised them all equally. No amount of cleaning would ever improve their home. God knew her mother had tried to keep the house spotless, but it was an impossible task. Sitting motionless on the stairs now, captive, and refusing to move any further from her mother, it was the most she could do to just keep breathing. She knew this was how he wanted it, wanted reason to find fault. Nothing her mother ever did made any difference. He just wanted a reason, any reason, to beat her down. Voice or fists, it didn't matter. She knew he was the one who had control over the money, as it was he who worked, and it was he who drank and gambled it away, leaving her mother with barely anything to feed them, let alone any money for some paint to brighten the house. But what did any of them care for a bright house when there was never any sunshine in their lives, no matter how much the sun shone in the sky? All 3 of them, her mother, her sister, and her, lived in perpetual fear of the moment he came through the front door. Some days he was so drunk he just fell on the sofa and slept. Those days weren't so bad. Some days he won something. Never anything compared to his losses, but at least there would be no screaming that night. No fresh bruises. No taxi rides to the hospital. And those days weren't so bad. But the other days, these sorts of days. Her mother had to be the clumsiest person in the whole of the state. She had walked into cupboards and fallen downstairs so many times, as if the ER staff believed it.
Gosh, that's a little bit intense, isn't it? Gosh.
Yeah, it really is.
Wow. Okay, we're gonna skip on to the next scene. I remember I made me cry when I started editing that ages ago. I hadn't read it for ages, like probably years, and it just made me cry. Whew, okay. Saturday. It's Saturday morning. Let's rock and roll this. We're going to head to a party. 3,000 miles away, Darrell Augustus Bartholomew Blackmore allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction as he lathed on his personal sun lounger. The raised dais and the tilt of his upper body on the cushions gave him the perfect vantage point from which to survey his birthday party. The party would go on until early dawn. Night would become day. Quick, do a massive corner that way so we can bring the camera back into the middle. Sorry, guys. The party would go on till early dawn. Night would become day. The exotic made plentiful, and a new definition given to the meaning of the word excess. He was not a man to obey the rules of convention nor nature, and if there was anyone who thought himself above moral limitations, mortal limitations, it was he. At the relatively tender age of 18, there was nothing tender about him at all, not even if one tried to look for it. He surveyed the scene of his own creation from the elevated position he held above his guests, a luxury decked-out gazebo behind him, bodyguards and waiters standing in their positions, silent and waiting. A table to his right had his favourite cocktail of the moment on it, a Belvedere, which was a combination of apricot juice, a rare Charles Hyde-Syke champagne from 1981, and an even rarer Louis XIII Black Pearl cognac, all decades older in vintage than the young man drinking them. The ingredients alone had cost over £200,000. The drink had never tasted so satisfying, and he didn't have to care about the cost. Didn't have to care about much at all, really. And as he watched the beautiful people, mostly the same age as himself, enjoying themselves on the top of the skyscraper he owned, he had every reason to feel happy. His rooftop had been transformed into a tropical-themed pool party that would set a new personal best, even for his high standards of extravagance and debauchery. The night sky was dark and distance beyond the lights, making the expanse of space around the bright island of frivolity and naked flesh somehow even more decadent. The laughter, music and singing contrasting with the muted tones of a city at night. Before him was the new generation of glitterati, the jewels of Americans' wealthiest families and most of the world. Millions wished they were part of it. Millions would never come close to imagining the reality of their experience. He detected a certain thrill of smug satisfaction, knowing everyone was enjoying themselves at his expense, and it was savoured in the same cynical way he had tested the fine champagne, the bubbles now playing on his tongue. He was the only son and heir of the richest man on the planet, Richard Blackmore. Yet, he was also a billionaire of his own making. What was a little party, with wealth like that? But to think it was his 18th birthday party, he felt much older. Much older. His body was young and fit, his lean but muscular 6'4" frame enough to make any female stop and look again, and it made him perfect for his position in the Harvard football team. His body was yet to become its full adult shape, his mind, though, was already honed to adulthood. He had already done so much, had experienced and tasted plenty of what life could offer, and well, things tended to bore him. Even here, at this spectacular party with so many amusements and so many people, he felt alone. Had always felt alone. It was like a shadow that accompanied him no matter how many people he surrounded himself with. Daryl turned his head slightly and saw one of his best friends, Luke, easing the bikini top off one of the gorgeous brunettes he recognised from their Harvard business group, his head dipping to taste her breasts. It was happening all over the place, girls and guys losing their few clothes, and it was happening all over the country. It was spring break, and he was throwing the party early to set the benchmark, well aware no party would top this one. No one had turned down the invite. People had rather been begging him for one. Inviting most of his fellow students had clearly been a good idea, as his popularity rating would skyrocket, even though he knew it was an empty achievement. His true friends he counted on one hand. The rest were in awe of him, hoping to keep him in their sphere in case they needed his influence. So many people that need or want something, but what do I want? Despite being a year younger than many at Harvard, his acumen and who his father was had got him a place a year early, and he had done nothing if not proved why he should be there. He partied hard, but he worked even harder, settling for nothing less than top grades even whilst launching a new company almost every month. Entrepreneurial profiteering online was easy money when he had fingertip access to web developers and products and the means to make it happen. He'd had no intention of living in his father's shadow or living off his father's wealth. One day, Daryl had promised himself many times over the world would remember him for far more than his father. He had already made a good start. A slow smile of intent curved his perfect lips at the thought of how much success lay in his future. He was unstoppable. He had the world as his proverbial oyster, and he was intending to swallow it whole with some more ludicrously fine champagne. He caught the eye of the girl he had noticed earlier on his way from the hot tub to his dais. He had spotted her in the crowd and liked what he'd seen sufficiently to have trailed a finger up her arm as he passed, confident, even if she did not know it yet, that she had been told. Such a gesture indicated his interest, and it would be prudent of her if she did not ignore it. He now tilted his head a tiny fraction in her direction, her gaze completely held. Within seconds she moved away from the friend she was with without a word, and came towards him through the crowd of gyrating bodies, moving to music and raising hands to the sky like pagans of a new age. Alcohol and confidence, an addictive combination. Daryl leaned his head back, slipped his bespoke shades over his green eyes and sighed. It was almost criminal how easy life was sometimes.
End of part 1.